my dearest colleague Jacob. Thank you for the letter. I am delighted to hear of the success of your venture in Pennsylvania. However, it was not enough to persuade me to join your cause. I hope we bear you with as the heart. Don't be not equals. Love always, Yuri.
It has been a hot minute since I talked about faith on the channel, and whilst we left off compiling everything into the Faith Compendium for your viewing pleasure, there were still things left unanswered. And no, that was not new audio that you heard from Faith, the Holy Quadrilogy sequel in 3D. It was, however, the letter to Jacob found in Gary's personal quarters in Faith Chapter 3, which some of you may not know that Jacob is actually the lead antagonist of the horror action shooter Dusk, another of New Blood Interactive's games. Created by David Szymanski, who, as you may or may not know, their latest masterpiece of a game, Iron Lung, is being adapted into a film with, of course, Markiplier, in case you were living under a rock. Now, Dusk is an acclaimed retro shooter in the mould of old school games like Doom and Quake, where you're blasting through levels, dual wielding freaking shotguns, basically kicking ass and taking names. It's great fun. I enjoyed all of it. Especially as it brings back memories for me personally. You know, I was a Quake guy back in the day. I loved Quake 2. They even did a demake of the game called Dusk 82, which I was not aware of until very late on doing this video. So let me know if you'd be interested in diving into that, because it's another sort of retro, it's a retro puzzle game, but may have some lore as well, who knows. Now, whilst the story of Dusk isn't inherently told to you in a conventional way, this is where environmental storytelling kicks in, and once I managed to dig a bit deeper, I found there is much that can be discussed here, and it delves into some of the most creepiest and unfathomable horrors ever concocted. And so I thought, as it's spooky season, I'm hoping this video doesn't come out after Halloween, but if it does, sorry. And as it was requested highly a while back when my channel actually got views, then we dive into the world of Dusk and learn about another fanatical, crazed cult hell-bent on unleashing unspeakable evil onto the world. This, everyone, is Dusk. Set in the town of Dusk in Pennsylvania, you play as Dusk Dude, which the name is an obvious nod to Doom Guy, you know, another inspiration of the game, clearly. Very little is known of Dusk Dude and his intentions, but based on what we have seen in episode 3, mission 7, Homecoming, it is theorized and also confirmed by the devs that he returned to his hometown to find his family dead at the hands of the cult. And we will get into that further, but let's not get ahead of ourselves. That's episode 3. We begin in the foothills in episode 1, where Dusk Dude is hung up by hooks in a basement, captured by the cult, presumably after he tracked them down once he found out what happened to his family, and he was subsequently captured himself. He makes his way through farmland, sewers, and eventually the town of Dusk itself, and he begins to realise that everything is not as it seems. These people may actually be messing around with some occult or otherworldly things. And this is most evident in episode 1 mission 10 early on, titled Creations, where, as the name suggests, the cult have created these things only dubbed the Experiments, likely through means not of this world. I mean, look at the freaking thing. After defeating them and moving on to episode 2, the Facilities, it's here where Dusk Dude gets a real taste of some of the depraved activities the cult have been doing and what is happening behind the scenes. For it is here that we find those fabled ruins, the ruins that were discovered by the cult a long time ago that led them to create the Facilities. Through finding ancient rituals within the ruins, it meant that they created the Thresher, the literal meat grinder that is chopping up the inhabitants of this town to send their flesh and bones to that of the newly established Escher Labs, powering their crazed experiments into anti-gravity and other mind-bending research. Then also using that and their new reactor, a Skylab and an altar, all whilst cracking open a hole in the earth, they were then able to create a portal to another world. And it was through this portal where the cult story really begins, and who, or rather what, is really behind all of this. Now, much like Gary and the Eternal Order of the Second Death from Faith, this cult also worships otherworldly beings, as you might guess. Only the being this cult worships is that of Lovecraftian horror, the outer god Nyarlathotep, the puppet master pulling the strings of the cult, if you will. And if you're not familiar with eldritch terrors and Lovecraftian horror, in short, H.P. Lovecraft was an American writer in the early 1900s who is regarded as one of the most significant supernatural horror writers of the 20th century. The most notable of his creations was that of Cthulhu, who was another outer god. These outer gods generally like to cause death and destruction.
The dark and evil Cthulhu is bringing his angry wrath down upon the Burning Man Festival, Tom.
However, Nyarlathotep, it's more important to them causing madness and chaos. And one way he does this compared to other eldritch terrors is by walking the earth under the guise of an ordinary human being, originally as a pharaoh in the prose poem by H.P. Lovecraft. He is also said to often have a legion of followers like that of a cult he can toy with and manipulate, with Jacob clearly being one of the first to have looked upon him in Dusk.
Nyarlathotep, the crawling chaos. I am the last. I will tell the Audience Void.
So now Dusk Dude has arrived into the Nameless City, which, by the way, is also an original short story by Lovecraft. It is here that everything, as you may guess, is also not as it seems. Dusk Dude faces an iron cathedral, a flooded underground city, a floating island, even a flesh-covered crypt, just to name a few. But it's Mission 7, Homecoming, as previously mentioned, where this world and Dusk Dude's memories begin to bleed into one, with more laughter that can be heard by the menacing and ever-present cult leader Jacob. You appear in familiar, if not strange, surroundings, like you're looking at a perfectly normal picture, and yet something just feels off, like a liminal space. And in my opinion, a really good example of Lovecraftian horror adapted, because that in itself is not an easy feat. And of course, the something off is the horrifying flesh and bone creatures, the lack of, a floor, a general area, the constant gravity changes, and the, brightly contrasted green sky. Dusk Dude then enters a particular house in this mission, to which he first states, "How can I be here?" And then seeing two familiar photos, one seemingly of him and his spouse, and the other of her and their child, both responses being, "It hurts to remember." Obviously implying that something bad happened to them, which we have now confirmed that they lost their lives at the hand of the cult, meaning that yes, Dusk Dude is basically John Wick / the Taken guy, and Dusk Dude being him pushes on through the gauntlets and eventually to another weirdly off version of the town of Dusk. And it is here his showdown with Jacob can finally take place, where his revenge can finally take place, where the death of the cult leader Jacob takes place.
At last, you finally arrived. You shall be my
final test.
Bombastic side-eye. Criminal offensive side-eye.
However, it is not Dusk Dude that delivers the final blow. As we see, once you get Jacob's health down low enough, his followers appear, branding him unworthy, and finish him off before dying themselves. We then come face to face with the aforementioned nyarlathotep, who, as they state, likes us better.
You, I like better.
Before taking on a familiar kind of looking Lovecraftian form to try and beat us. Before we show it the light. Only Dusk Dude gets more than he bargained for when the outer god of 1,000 forms declares,
Enough! You are indeed worthy, and so now my power is yours.
and Dusk Dude essentially becoming that which he sought to destroy, continuing a cycle of madness and chaos. And so that is the lore of Dusk. And this video was short and sweet. We probably could have gone into detail on a few more areas within the game, but I think this was just a nice overview, and also I didn't have a lot of time to make a horror video before, for Halloween, so I do apologise. Again, videos are coming sort of as and when at the minute, but diving into game takes, you know, a decent chunk of inspiration from sort of Eldritch terrors and Lovecraftian horror, which is always fascinating to sort of dive into. And because of the photo, we now know that the world of Dusk and Faith are in the same universe, which means potentially other kinds of Eldritch terrors could eventually show up in Faith. Who knows what the future holds for either of these game series? However, one very important question remains for us to solve. Who is that man? Thanks for watching.